Hello, welcome to the new episode of Growing Down. Today we are fortunate to have John Dupuy. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Dupuy.
Dupuy.
Exactly.
I found John years ago. His book, Integral Recovery, has helped me as an addiction counselor help identify what an integral treatment plan looks like, and has been I can't tell you enough how much that book has influenced the direction I've gone in as a counselor. So I'm very pleased that you've agreed to be on our show. John, can you tell us, the listeners, just a little bit about yourself?
Well, I left home at the age of 14 and it started there. No, I actually did, but I'm not going to get into that part. I am the current roles. I am the CEO of iAwake Technologies, which is a really cutting edge brain entrainment producing company, and we have fabulous people working with us. They're really gifted, and the whole idea is this brain entrainment technology fits within a beautifully within an integral practice. Okay, doesn't do it all. You still have to go to the gym and work out and do that stuff, but it really helps in all those particular lines. I'm also the author, as you mentioned, of Integral Recovery. Let's see, I have a book here, kind of backwards, but anyway, and yeah, it's a great book. I think I channeled it. Every once in a while I'll pick it up. I was in an office a while back and I wrote that. Good God. Yeah. So I don't know if you guys can relate to that, but when you're, in a zone, or you've had a great podcast or something like that, you just feel like something's come through you. And that's just one of the best experiences we can have as human beings. So I worked for years in the field of addiction recovery and started some programs, wilderness programs, to help people suffering from the disease. And out of being dissatisfied with the current models, I was trying to put, a holistic approach. And at that point, I discovered Ken. And I knew Ken from graduate school years before. By the way, I have an MA in transpersonal psychology. And I was familiar with his early work, really loved it. But then I discovered the map, right? The Aqua map. And it just like budding immediately. I just saw it was like the Rosetta Stone for understanding addiction and treatment and all that. And I was actually sure that other people must be stumbled onto that. And as it turned out, there was an early paper before my book came out. And there were 3 authors. And I went back and I tried every trick I knew to try to find them. And it was like Scotty beamed them up. Just could not get a hold of them. So I may not have been the first person to think of it in those terms, but I was pretty early on, and it's kind of become the standard in integral recovery, if you will. And to me, it's so intuitive, it just, of course, why hadn't we figured this out before? And it's kind of when you get familiar with the Aqua map, it just, once you really get it, it changes everything. Things aren't ever the same. So. And any more about me? I, love playing the blues. I'm music, I'm a songwriter, done about 3 albums over the years worth of original material. And that's, yeah.
Awesome.
And I've been in the integral world for quite a bit. I got there, Integral Naked was still going on. And the files were pretty shallow. And my first trip to Boulder, Colorado was when the whole huge scene was there. And it was a trip I got to see all that very interesting stuff. So it's been something I've been working with and laboring in for a while.
Nice. Well, thank you for being on the show. And in true Growing Down style, I think we're just going to riff on some ideas. We kind of toss some ideas around at the beginning, and one of them was trying to narrow in on the definition of what a progressive integralist is. And I know for myself, recently Jeff Salzman and Steve McIntosh, who we had on our show, did a show on the term post-progressive. And I know I'm recently reading a book by Rabbi Michael Lerner that introduces the term spiritual progressive. But for me, it's really trying to, and especially with integral politics, make sure you're addressing all the 4 quadrants. Yeah. And then how does that inform your opinion as a politician to make the most correct response to perhaps what is needed in that moment? And politics can stretch over many different areas, one of them being addiction. And I
You
think
bet.
being informed integrally is at least how I sort of see an integral progressive politician, or if that's your view, is that you can bring in the information from all the quadrants and then make the most educated guess as far as how to help the most people within that framework.
Yeah, and I've been reading Hansi Freinock and his stuff recently, and yeah, right on. It's a very fresh breath of what politics should be. And my basic definition, and like I said, Corey, I was saying before the show started, my friend Corey Dupuy, who runs Integral Life, mentioned the word integral progressive, and I just went, yes, I am too. And what that means to me is I just think there's no way there should be homeless people, hungry people, poor people, people without health care, people without food, people without education, people without support. When we have it within our abilities to give that to all human beings, why the hell don't we do it? What is keeping us back? And of course, you're going to have to use the integral map to figure it out and do it in a way that's intelligent and right. But it's just like, huh? Are you kidding me? How can we not make the force of our governments the happiness of all creatures, not just human beings, but all creatures? And that's a noble thing to get fired up about and to work for. And I guess that's kind of my definition, but I definitely have a lot of passion and a lot of heart behind it. So I appreciate what you guys are doing here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons, or sort of at the beginning of this podcast, on Twitter, we were friends with some people who identified as integralists, and we were all Bernie supporters, and sort of questioned sort of how you could identify as an integralist, but not be behind ideas that, like Medicare for all, for example. For me, you have a policy that brings in the basic moral intuition of how you can help the most people, and I think that was one of the seeds of this podcast, at least at the beginning, was sort of how people that identify as integral can also see political problems from two different points of view.
Yeah. So were you behind Bernie and his Medicare for all?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I think it's a no-brainer. I mean,
right.
Of course. Why don't we give infants the same care we give old people? Oh, and everybody in between. Well, because it's about making money. That's the only real reason that you can argue against it, that healthcare is about a profit. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with profit within the realms of sanity and morality, right? But it's not about that, right? The purpose of the military is not to make money for arms makers. It's to protect those who can't protect themselves. Anyway, you got me going. You pulled that string. So yes, well, good. Yeah, me too. And I just think it's just an obvious, and whether it's just like Medicare, whatever system, but everybody birth to pre-birth to grave, should have the medical care that we need to care for each other as human beings. And Queen Elizabeth gave a speech on COVID catastrophe in England, and she says, "I don't see empty streets. I see streets flowing with love and care for one another." I was like, why couldn't we have some leadership over here which say something like that? It's like, anyway, don't get me started. Of course, maybe that's the idea, to get me started, right?
Well, John, do you have a sort of a canned answer for a very large sort of question? But I was wondering, what is your definition of addiction?
Yeah, I do have, I don't know if there's canned answers, but I certainly, can speak to that. It is a compulsive disorder that you cannot control or stop, even when you know it's killing you. Okay. And a lot of us, not everybody that uses or abuses drugs is an addict. Okay. A lot of people, you go through a certain stage in your life and, man, I'm drinking too much. It's getting in the way of my studies or my relationships, or, I'm not as fit as I want to be. And so you can cut back or quit. That is not an option for an addict. And they really can't do it by themselves. If you're just a problem drinker, yeah, you can tough it out and do this stuff. But addicts, the addict self becomes this whole other personality, and it just takes over, and the real self just gets lost into it, and this addict compulsive sociopathic, lying, stealing, cheating, excuse making. It's just this horrible thing. And if any of you have ever had friends that have been alcoholics or addicts, and you see this transformation in personality from, you know, a normal, regular person to just a complete asshole, you know, that is working on some kind of working on the moral level of Trump or something. That's how bad it gets. Sorry, Donald. But anyway, you know, does that help? The incapacity to stop even when you know it's killing you. And there's the big denial thing. It takes a while to get to that point, because for a while you're just, well, yeah, I can control it. Yeah, I got this. And it's a progressive disease. Okay, it starts out here and it goes all the way to the end until it kills you, or might as well be dead. And in the beginning phases of it, there can be this denial system that works, where you really, you know, you're lying to everybody else to cover up whatever you're doing to get your drugs, and being high all the time. And at the end, that breaks down, and I just need drugs, man, and I'll do whatever I have to do to get it. And if there's some that has some moral structure that they're still in touch with, at that time they might suicide, because you know, what you become and what you're doing to others is just not acceptable. And there's very little hope at that point. It certainly feels like you're trapped.
Yeah, I know. Yesterday, I participated a little bit in Jeremy Gebser's class, where they watched the movie Annihilation, and the subject of self-destruction came up. And I think, you know, I was looking at some numbers today, and especially with the opioid crisis, and in 2018, just looking at some of the numbers of deaths, and I specifically kind of wanted to look at sort of the race angle on the opioid deaths. And in 2018, the numbers I found, I believe this was from the CDC, talked about whites 35,000, blacks 6,000, and Hispanic 4,000. And I know it's
what of those numbers are 4,000? What's the
deaths?
Oh, deaths,
and broken down by race.
And how much a time period was that?
And that was 2018.
The whole year? I read it the other day, and like 400,000 people OD'd in 2019. Over 400,000.
Yeah, I was just sort of breaking down the numbers, and at least that I could be wrong. And my main thing was kind of looking at, especially with self-destruction and stuff, and how it seems to be, I think even in some areas, that the life expectancy has lowered over the last few years.
Got to be, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess my angle on this was trying to look at it from a systematic point of view, and trying to identify, as a culture, what could we do, and again, this is from an integral perspective, of what could we do to solve maybe some of the underlying issues that could be contributing to this sort of increase in self-destruction.
Well, just very broadly, is we need to live in a culture and a civilization where everyone feels honored and that you matter, you know, and that you're a part of it. You know, it's the isolation. You know, we've done some really good things. We've created a lot of material stuff and a lot of amazing things. In fact, we're talking now, right, on this technology. It's unbelievable. I have no idea how this is done, but I use it every day. And someone once said, I forget who it was, but he said, moral behavior is how you act when you belong, when you feel that you belong. So if you really love your family and respect your family, and you go to a party and there's some lines or some weird shit there, you know, no, man, sorry, I can't do this because it's not about me. It's my family, for crying out loud, you know. And I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe it'll just be a fun experience, but maybe it won't be, you know, because some of us can do it and walk away from it, and a lot of us can't, you know, hence addiction. So, yeah, hi, Matt, you disappeared. So, I forget what I was answering the question. Oh, what would we do? And I said, yes, have a, and one of the things that I write about in my book, and it's been one of the major things that I've been working on in my life and with others over the last decade or so, is integral practice. And, when for about 8 years, I had my house in Utah, this old Victorian house full of addicts, and they just lived, it was a treatment center. We just lived and breathed and did all this stuff together. And one of the things that was very clear to me, because when I was working the families also via phone or the internet, I would get them doing the exact same practices that the students were, and I told the students, newsflash, this integral practice, the body, the mind, the emotional shadow, and the spiritual practices that we're doing here is not just for you guys. You guys are just lucky because you're the squeaky wheels, but everybody needs this. And so you guys stick with this and you're going to be the leaders, and addicts often, and it's probably confirmed by a lot of our experiences, are just the most sensitive, the best, the most intelligent, the creative. They're not our awfulest people. They're often just precious, precious souls that have got caught up in this. And it's such a tragedy to lose that kind of contribution and talent and all that we get from them. So, I think that getting the idea of integral practice built into our culture, age appropriate. And one of the huge things that integral brings to the scene is the developmental stuff. Okay. Once you kind of get the developmental stuff, it's like, and spiral dynamics is great, and Ken ran with it, and there's different models out there, but just that idea that we all start at stage one and we work up to the highest levels that we're capable of. And if we engage in an ongoing transformational practice, it's pretty good. A lot of us can get up there to these levels where there's greater wisdom, greater compassion, greater capacity to take other perspectives and judge intelligently between those perspectives. Like, as Ken says, not all perspectives are the same. But if we could begin that each child knows that they matter, they're loved, okay, and that they have a something to do in their life that's important. And you're on the road to find out, and this is how you do it. And this is how you prepare yourself to become the person that you were born to be. So we want you to be the butterfly and not die a caterpillar. And the way that we found that we can actually take charge and responsibility for our evolution is through integral practice. And that's a very positive, exciting story. And of course, the practice keeps evolving and changing as we go through different, a 3-year-old is not going to be the same as an 83-year-old. Obviously, it's going to be different practices. But it's something that, even in the hardest, darkest times, is something that we can hang on to, and something that gives us hope and resilience. And, because I have a way through my many years of this inner meditation and inner prayer. And I think meditation is a preparation for prayer. In other words, when you actually get down into that deep place, then you can experience the presence of God. And I'm comfortable with that word after many years of struggling with it. And so you can get in touch with this higher source, with this wisdom and learning. But before that, if you're just randomly out there trying to, watch Fox News and make a philosophy for what matters in life, and why not get fucked up? That's pretty, why not just have some fun? And this seems to be a really, fast way to have fun really quickly, and it is. Stuff really works. However, it only works for a while, and then it creates a much greater hell than you ever bargained for. Oh.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier. I'm reading Revolutionary Love by Rabbi Michael Ernst. So a lot of his ideas are in my head right now. And he was talking a little bit about how he's been part of movements of the left, where people in the left have sort of sabotaged some of the sort of areas they were working on because they weren't sort of fully dealing with all the stuff that they had going on for them. And what I've noticed a lot, I think even in our Discord channel and sort of other sort of integral folks, I'm not sure if the upper right sort of neglected, but I really like this idea of the integral life practice. I think you talked about the integral transformative practice also in your book.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it, it's fine.
Yeah. And I guess, from a political perspective, I really think obviously people have to get their own shit in line before they can start helping others, right?
It would help.
Yeah. So how do you go about, and I know Jeremy and Ryan and I have had some debates about the developmental theorists. I know some people have identified as sort of an elitist perspective. What's your angle on that?
Well, forgive me if I quote Ken again, but I think this was in a conversation on the phone I had with him one time. And we were talking, well, is this elitist? And he said, bet your ass, but it's an elitism to which everyone is invited. You get to choose to be the elite version of yourself or not. So take responsibility and stop whining. Okay. And, we'll try to support each other on this task. But yeah, it is elite because very few people in any field achieve greatness, and the ones that have that, the eye of the tiger, the commitment, the courageous grittiness, get there. And those who don't, well, sorry, but you could do it if you wanted to. And you got a lot of great excuses, but everybody does. So choose to do the work necessary to become what you can be. So yeah, it's elitist, but in a good way,
Yeah, that's sort of my angle too, in the sense of if it is the most elitist perspective, it's also the most inclusive. So to me, there's a contradiction of definitions there, because it's not like you're saying this doesn't belong to everyone. The more you climb the ladder, the less you identify with your ego, and hopefully you have more compassion and care for others. So if that's, I guess, an elitist perspective, then at least that's my angle on it.
And that's, of course, that's the problem you get with these people that are calling themselves progressives, at the university, that Ken wrote about in Boomeritis many years ago, when I hadn't even heard of that. Like, what is he talking about? This crazy, funny, wild book. But it was a very important book to me because in the index, he gave a conversation of the characters in the book, and they were talking about their reactions to 9/11 from all the different levels. When I read that, something just snapped, and I was like, oh, yes, I can start to understand the world. So, yeah, I'll let you go on.
So I want to bring it back to before we started talking about developmentalism, to a few things, because one of the questions that comes up quite a bit in this theme of how do we deal with mental health in a society culturally, lower left and ideologically, which is very aggressively alienating, right? And this is something that Mark Fisher, I don't know if you're familiar with Mark Fisher's work, but he's written quite a bit about depression and capitalism. But he makes the argument for why mental health is a political issue, and where he says, I'll just kind of read Megan Day's synopsis of his take, and then we can kind of riff on that. But in the privatization of stress, the erosion of job security coupled with punitive and hyper-extractive management techniques put working people on the edge. It is hardly surprising that people who live in such conditions, where their hours and pay can always be increased or decreased, and their terms of employment are extremely tenuous, should experience anxiety, depression, and hopelessness. And he goes on to talk about that quite a bit, but we mentioned the opioid crisis, and I can't help but think about the Sackler family, who were responsible for that with Purdue Pharma. We have to remember, like, these guys were responsible for, at least 200,000 deaths, right? And they made a lot of money. And I know they went bankrupt in the fall of last year due to the wave of lawsuits against them. But we have to think about this as sort of an extractive economic policy and a culture that allowed that to occur, right? So the lower left, I think, as important as having an individual practice and being like well suited to deal with a sick society, the question that looms larger is, how do we deal with a society that is engendering illness and mental health issues and alienation, et cetera? And of course, it links the political to the mental issues, to the sociological issues and economic ones. So I kind of see these integrally as all together. But it does raise this difficult question of, like, what do we do, right? Like, of course, society should be better. Of course, it shouldn't be so alienating. But the more, or putting it this way, if we don't tackle these socioeconomic pressures, how are we going to actually resolve this or remediate this, in the structural sense?
Yeah. Well, just getting back to the four quadrants, and I assume most people are integralists here, that, the four quadrants are. Yeah, you can't just attack the problem in one quadrant. You know, it's like welfare. You throw checks to poor people. It doesn't work. It's not that you shouldn't be doing it. It's just not enough. You know, yes, they need money. Yes, they need to be able to go soar. And everybody, I think everybody should have a minimum so they can work. They can live a dignified life. You know, that's me. But if you don't, you just can't. You have to attach all four quadrants. You have to work on the interior spaces too. And there you go with meditation. And that's why I've been so passionate about our company, iWake Technologies, because most of us, or many of us, me personally, I'll make it an I statement, had a hard time engaging in meditation for many years because traditional meditation just didn't work fast enough for my oh so needy needs, right? And I had been involved in a religious cult, conversation for another time, when I was a teenager. And so I wasn't ready for an ashram or a guru. Thank you very much. Been there, done that. And so I struggled, and I knew it was important. But it wasn't until I discovered this technology, and that really democratizes the ability for deep transformative interior practice, makes it much more effective and much more available to us who are willing to do it. And I think when we engage in that, when it becomes like, for example, working out, not everybody works out, but I think most people know they would be better if they did. You know, most people know that smoking is really not good. And I think that the levels of course, it's a really hard addiction to overcome, but people know that. I think when we start to build a culture and an understanding that interior work is essential. It's not everything, but it's essential. So if we're gonna approach the problems that Mark Fisher is addressing, and rightly so, then we have to focus on people's own interior health and their personal lives, their spirituality, their emotional strength, their sense that they're here to do something, though they may have not found it. When I was a young man, I always tried to read the good books and talk to smart people and ask questions and shut up. Because my idea was, I don't know what I'm going to do. I may not have anything important to do, but my number's ever called. You know, I want to be ready. So prepare yourself. You know, whether it's your, you know how you party or not party, or the schools you go to, the books you read, the company you keep, knowing that you have to take care of yourself so you can be the best version of yourself. Because ultimately, that's the gift you have to give back to life. And ultimately, true happiness comes when we find that and we do that.
This is a great segue to something we often talk a lot about on this show, which is how the left needs to integrate some notions of interior development, ethical character development. And if we have, as long as that void of interior conversation exists, it can be filled with not so healthy forms of it, right? Or people who are looking for meaning and purpose, and some kind of inspirational ideal that can kind of galvanize their spirits. It can be hijacked by unhealthy forms of right-wing fundamentalism or fascism or whatever, right? And so one thing that I really liked about your book is you talked about the importance of ethics, and including the ethical line of development, which is something I'm a huge fan of, because I feel like ethics is kind of like not looked at as something very sexy, and it's kind of swept under the rug in a lot of modern spiritual conversations. So my question to you is, how do you think as a culture we can talk about the importance of ethics as it relates to our own selves and our lives and empowering ourselves, but do it in a way that doesn't lead to this kind of judgmental attitude of, oh, you're a drug addict, you know, it's a moral failing, or maybe you should therefore be in jail, or you're in poverty, or you're homeless, it's your fault, right? So how can we talk about ethics in an empowering way without leading it to, having that lead to blaming the victim or other kinds of judgmental attitudes?
Yeah, addiction is not a more failing, or maybe there is some responsibility. Nobody made you drink that drink. Maybe they did if they didn't, but in and itself, it seems to be genetic, and a lot of us have it. But it's not a moral failing in itself, but it causes you to morally fail and to do acts that you otherwise wouldn't do. So addicts aren't completely off the hook, They do have the responsibility to say, I'm fucked and I need help. I'm going to reach out and I'm going to try to be, not my big conflated, addict self-ego, and not all addicts like that. Some addicts are absolutely just already crushed, they're not You know, they're not tripping on their egos and stuff like that. I think 12 Steps was largely written for white men who are of the ego inflation variety, you know, and you get a little, you know, a crack whore off the streets, and, you know, and she didn't have any ego left. You know, you don't need to beat her over the head. Don't think you're so special. I mean, she knows it. She needs to be the mirror held up so she can learn she is special and she is cared for and she is loved and she does have a purpose. So, and I think, you know, getting back to the developmental thing, the thing that we're supposed to take on at second tier is kind of this pastoral attitude to the prior levels. And all of them have healthy ethical codes that could apply to where they're at. So we need to be able to language that in languages they can get. So, you know, we have all this, you know, this great postmodern stuff that we're doing, you know, and we've been all putting together on this very special thing, by the way. I mean, I think we're really a special part of history that those of us are working on. This is a big deal that's going on, but you have to language it in ways that that they can hear, and language it in ways that makes it possible for them to keep evolving and progressing to the next stage of their moral development. So it has to be the ethics, and we can talk about just pure ethics, what we'd like to see as integralists, but then we have to talk about it in ways that the majority of the people are going to be able to hear it, understand it, and do it.
Do you think you can give an example of that? Because we've talked about translating across value spheres as a very important kind of political practice in this time of polarization, and even as a strategy, you know, if someone's going to run for office, right? So can you give an example of identifying someone's kind of moral center of gravity or value cluster, then speaking to that directly in a way that can resonate with them?
Yeah, let's try that. Like I went through a evangelical fundamentalist Christian stage when I was a young man, teenager. And, you know, I memorized lots of scripture, King James Version. And, you know, I really got on the inside. I understood what that born again experience was and what, you know, loving Jesus and God. And I still bring forward a lot of that, you know, that second person relationship with spirit in my own practice today. Obviously, I've let, you know, go a lot of that stuff, but a lot of it's still vital with me. So I can speak to people on that sincerely. And when I'm talking to them, I speak in the language of faith, like, amen, and God bless you. You know, I don't know. Let's pray about it. You know, it's like that. And if you were trying to get people to behave more wisely and environmentally, you know, you can just talk about, you know, and quote some verses from scripture about, you know, the creation and being gifted this and all the beauty and all these things that God has given us, you know, and you know, the judge is going to come back, and how have we left his creation? Have we trashed it? Or he said, oh, Lord, we made it even more beautiful, you know, than it was. And so brothers and sisters, we really, you know, this hurts the heart of God. And we need to wake up and bless all his creatures and be responsible stewards for all this beauty and all this goodness we begin. So let's get together and pray about it and see what we can do to do a better job. And people go, okay, amen, brother. And they'll pray and they'll try to do a better job. So, you know, would you get into orange modernity, you know, you have to show them that environmental stuff is going to help them make money and be successful and blah, blah, you know, and they go, oh, yeah, really? Show them the numbers, right? So each level has its own, you know, and for red, you know, it's just like, hey, you know, nature in the woods is where we get our strength. You know, that's where we become men. That's where we, you know, we get in trust with the gods. So we need to be warriors and protectors of this land and not defile it, you know, because the gods are going to get pissed or something like that. I'm just making this up as I go. But, you know, in that way, and of course, green, when you're talking about environment, you know, you preach it to the choir, you know, they really deeply, deeply get it in a real, kinesthetic way. I would distinguish that from what's going on in universities now with this postmodern craziness, you know, that everything is cultural and blah, blah, blah. Yes, and everything is culturally influenced, but it's not completely. That's so partial. There's other things, you know, going on, you know, and if you don't believe me, just pump yourself up with a lot of testosterone and see how you start acting. You know, you don't believe me, then pump yourself later on with a bunch of estrogen and see what happens. This stuff is biologically and culturally influenced. And anyway, I think that the postmodernism really hurts me, hits at home, because I've identified myself as a progressive and seeing progressives acting like Nazis and they're watermelon, like green on the outside and red on the inside. It really hurts me because they're making all the garbage from Fox News and that they're such easy targets to discredit all the good things that the progressive impulse wants to do in the world. And I definitely think that that kind of postmodern is very dogmatic, and they certainly lost touch with the mystical or the spiritual. Okay, because I don't think that kind of rigid, hateful, judgmental, whatever that thing is, survives very well in the practice of depth and what we run into when we're deeply inside of our interiors. So they need to start meditating and praying, just get it together, because you're hurting the cause, and we are different. I'm not a man is not the same as a woman, and I know we're all, there's from heterosexual to homosexual over here, and there's kind of this line that we're all on, and some of us are in the middle and this and that, and some it's the other way. But, it's like, yeah, but it's okay to be hetero, by the way. God doesn't hate you. It's okay to be a man. And men are different. We have a different thing that we're here to do. And if you're perfectly balanced, masculine, feminine, well, God bless you, good, but most of us aren't there. But it's okay to be a masculine man as long as you're a good man, and we did an interview on a podcast that I was on, and we're interviewing a woman who was very feminist in her orientation. I'm feminist in my orientation too. The early feminism, I don't know what this new stuff, I don't relate to it at all, but have women been oppressed and did a lot of bad things? Yes, of course. Do we need to clean that up? Yes. Do we need to behave better as men? Of course. Do we need to honor women? Yes. Do we need to be respectful? Yes. Do we need to ask permission? Of course. All of that stuff's obvious. So I don't know what the question was. Did I hit it anywhere in the field? Oh yeah, how to talk to different levels. I'm sorry. I just come on. Get it back. Whoa, awesome.
See, John, my question is, have you had people in your practice where they've had an allergy to integral?
Yeah, a lot of green people, and of course I have these two greens. The greens that I grew up were tie-dyed shirts and the Grateful Dead and hugging trees and smoking pot and just love. And then you have this thing that grew up in academia that it's identified as being at the same level, but it's something totally different. I think it's more of a regression to red. But yes, when I first had my born again integral experience, and you can kind of be annoying. I don't know if you guys experience this when you first get integral, because you think everybody wants to hear about it and it's a solution to everything. Well, at least I was. And so I was helping start a wilderness program that was very green. And it was just emergent green. These guys were just getting green. I mean, the leadership circle. And they were just, and so I'd go out there and, around the fire and talk about integral. And as soon as I started talking about levels of development, I said, no likey. So I said, okay, let's try this again. So I did it in circles of expanding compassion, and they totally got it. They went, okay, yeah, cool. That sounds really good. And that reflects my experience. So you just, yeah. And green, they're really against, yeah. So I probably get more pushback from green than any other level. And it's because of the hierarchy, and it's because, they don't like oppression. I was like, well, I don't either, but the more of us get to these high levels, the higher level of oppression is going to be, because the oppression happens at lower levels. So we need to get into the best versions of ourselves, however we can.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up, tying it to this question of how do we link these upper left practices, right? Because I see these as simultaneously arising, right? We have this question of, well, activists and progressives really need to work on themselves and bring, just a less rigidified, less oppositional internal space to these larger social questions, right? It'd be great if they meditated. It'd be great if they did shadow work or some kind of therapeutic practice. It'd be great if, the mediational spaces where these kinds of confrontations happen are facilitated in a more contemplative sense, right? Or something along those lines. These are things that even people on the left that I talk with, like Michael Brooks talks about, just like, wouldn't it be fantastic if we are in a state of mind that we get through, some kind of contemplative retreat where we're very open, we're very capable of listening to one another, very capable of empathizing. Be great. But on the other hand, we have this question of how to link these to the upper left and the lower left, or the individual therapeutic and social remediation and social healing together. Because I'm just thinking of the book by James Hillman. We've had 100 years of psychotherapy and the world's still getting worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this question that like modalities have popped up everywhere. There's thousands of different modalities now. And yet the link between the individual and the social is still missing, right? There's still this gap between all these wonderful practices and actually changing sociologically our culture to be more communal oriented, to be more oriented towards belonging, right? You mentioned meaning, feeling like we belong to our family or belong to a community might impact our decisions about working with substances or working with them in unhealthy ways through addiction. So yeah, this question of like, we've had 100 years of psychotherapy, the world's still getting worse. How do we link individual therapeutic modalities with the social? Because it seems like our culture is really good at keeping those divorced, right? It's really good at sort of privatizing mental illness, like Mark Fisher talks about. So how do we link them together better?
Yeah, well, I think, and mental health care is usually just, you're dealing with people that are having real problems. So you're really trying to eliminate the symptoms, through medication or this or that, to stop the immediate pain, but you have to get back to the causal stuff. And I think what makes integral life practice or transformative practice or just integral practice is that we know exactly what's to be done, the four basic issues that we have to deal with, and it's done on a daily, real basis. It's not just, I was at an integral talk by a pretty well-known integralist who was talking about integral practice, and at the end of it all, I said, well, what is your practice? He said, well, at this integral level, just thinking about it becomes a practice. Oh God, and that's been the failings of, the integral world. If we can't get our asses together and really engage in integral practice, how do they expect anybody else to, So we really need to clean up our own house. And then I think it will just be, was it Hansi Freinacht says, it'll be more attractive. The model will go, yeah, and if you're talking to Reds, it's like, they want to be strong warriors and everything. They understand, your superhero powers, you got to focus. I mean, you can talk about it in their own way. It's pretty easy with Red. And with Blue, Jesus talk all about interior prayer, and going in the closet in secret, and your Father will see you openly, and don't let anybody know you're praying, but go inside, interior prayer, meditation. It's all through the Bible, and nobody talks about it, And I went to a friend I rediscovered from my youth. We got together, and he goes to this big super church, right? One of these things, great performance, just professional and great speakers and everything. And then we went to the Bible class afterwards, and they were all, in the scripture and everything. I said, well, what about deep interior prayer? And they just looked at me like, what? Like, huh? So, and I can, when you're getting that kind of stuff, you should be able to back it up with scripture. So no, Jesus said, do this. When Jesus got sick of everybody, even the Son of God had to get away from him. He'd go up on a mountain and pray by himself, to get refilled, and if Jesus had to do that, how much more you and I, if we're going to be the kind of people that we need to be. And so I think it has to, first of all, and probably the answer is I have no clue. But what I would like to say is that we have to really start doing it ourselves. And, the opening line for our fellow integralists should be, hey, how's practice? What's going on? What are you learning? and how's it working for you? So, you know, it's the old green thing, you become the change that you want to be. But eventually, you know, if you could just start insinuating into the culture, and perhaps the artists, the musicians, and the screenwriters and the actors, you know, have to bring up this idea, you know, and there's all this, I mean, superheroes are big, you know. We got the Disney Channel, and I mean, most of it just superhero stuff. So why is that so appealing? Well, because people want to be powerful and strong and fight for something that's right, you know, and be more than themselves. And there's a lot of, you know, they're kind of making fun of it all, ha ha. But the real impulse is kind of a noble impulse. And what you don't want to do is just make it some kind of fantasy life you live in your games or something like that. Yeah, I conquered the world 3 times over in, you know, Magic Sword or whatever the hell it is. No, and say, no, well, this is kind of needs to be, you need to, and there's levels of life too, just like there's levels in games. But to become that person, to discover your super powers and your abilities, which are way beyond what you think could be, then this is what we're going to have to do. And the values of taking responsibility, I think that could hit across all developmental levels. You know, you talk about in this way is everybody, red, okay, responsibility, blue, green, amber, sorry, I get the colors mixed. It's all across the line. So to become the best person that you can be. And of course, why you're doing that is going to depend at what developmental level you are. And if you've got to be the best person you can be at Orange, it's going to be because you want to be a success, you know, and you want to make a lot of money and, you know, and nail this thing, right? And if you, and as a conservative Christian, you want to be the best person you be, so you can serve God and do God's will, and become the person that the Lord wanted you to be, you know. And in green, the same thing. How are we going to have the power to change the world if we don't have the power to change ourselves in a way that matters? So again, it gets back to and starting to talk about it, start moving it. And, you know, the whole 100th monkey thing, I think in the beginning, doing kind of something revolutionary like a daily integral practice is there's not a hell of a lot of support outside of integral circles. And even in integral circles, it was a really good idea for most of us, right? So you have to be pretty heroic, you know, to do something that not everybody else is doing. Nobody in your house understands why you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to sit there for an hour or two or whatever it is, you know, and your dedication to going to the gym and working out or doing whatever your practices are, and you know, all of this stuff. And part of the practice is also reading and listening to the right people. And that's why what you guys are doing is such an incredible good thing, you know, all over the world. I mean, dig the time we're living in. You know, these 3 brilliant young men with a vision and a dream have got together and, you know, are sharing this medicine with you know, everyone. So it's really an extraordinary time, but we really have to start with ourselves. And then, you know, for example, when I was living with addicts in my attic, we had a meditation room in my house, and these guys are, you know, pretty hard cases. And we, you know, we put on the headphones. This was before iAwake, because I was using other technologies at the time, HoloSync and other stuff. And they were just like, lying all over the cushion, just like a bunch of wiped out people with headphones on. And we do that for an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, 2 hours. And by about a week or a week and a half, people would be sitting up and they would start honoring their experience. And they would be able to, I don't know, really quickly differentiate between religion, and God, which most people were pissed off with, the God of religion, rightly so, and spirituality, and go, no, this is mine, this is real, you know. And they saw how it was starting to take them into their depths, and they were starting to be able to begin to process their wounds and their hurts and get in touch with something that was perhaps what they had been looking for, you know, when they were taking drugs. And again, the integral model's got so much in it, but the difference between states and stages, you know, it's a huge thing to get, you know. And in addiction, we're always chasing states, you know. And at first, you know, people talk about the first initial time when you did coke or your first injection of heroin or whatever it was, it's like, oh yeah, well, that kind of goes for a while, but never quite as good as the first time. And then it goes down, and then you keep chasing that state. You want to get back to it. And well, it's like we did with LSD back in the 60s. We got these experiences of unity and everything. Wow, I'm enlightened. Then you come down. Oh, I'm not enlightened. And so, well, maybe if I just stay high all the time, then I'll just walk around enlightened all the time. Well, that surely didn't work, because we were confusing states and stages, and these states are really good. And I think it's a positive thing that psychedelics are back on the scene. Hopefully you guys, your generation, can be a little smarter and learn from all the dumb things that we did, and use it in a responsible way. But that's an incredibly good way, because I think a lot of the worldviews, and I don't counsel this unless you're ready to do it, because who's done psychedelics here? Yeah. Well, don't do it if you're not ready, because it's serious stuff. But the understandings and the knowings and what we learn in these altered states really make, they just take our old ways of looking at things and our negative paradigms and just collapse them. And then we kind of have to start over and say, oh God, given that, now what? It's a wake up phase. And yeah, I can say a lot about that, but there's, I think, to use psychedelics successfully, you need to go in with having an integral practice already in place, and then and follow up with integral practice, which will help you assimilate and stabilize and really profit from what you're learning. Because if it's just like, just this vision you get and then you forget about it, and what's that mean? How do I get back there? And all this stuff, it's problematic, and can actually be worse than if you never did it at all. So again, we get back to the integral model, and we get back to the integral practice. And if you know the integral model, it helps you when you start, going to these higher levels. You understand what's going on. Or if you're having, moments of digression, which are really easy, you can go, oh, okay, under stress, right? You can go back downstairs. To be able to objectify that in some sense and understand it allows us to more skillfully put this all together. So we become the butterflies that we were meant to be.
Yeah, I want to link this to some of what you've been saying to a previous conversation we had with Dr. Reverend Delman Coates. And one of his points, which I think is kind of implicit in the integral model, if we really kind of radically take what it's saying very seriously, which is the sense of the lower left and the upper left and the lower right, they're all co-arising. We always talk about that tetra-arising. But sure, what would it mean to translate that into a kind of practice, right? Because Delman talks about the sense that individual salvation, and we can understand that transpersonally, we can understand that as an ethical progression. Individual salvation is integrally linked to the community, communal salvation, the practice of the communitas. So I kind of see these as sort of wrapped up in each other in this question of how do we facilitate, create, and build a practice that is also sociological, which is also communal, right? Like by developing myself, right? By working out these things in myself, I'm also working out things in the world, and not seeing it as like, okay, doing it privately affects somehow magically in the world, right? But
No,
actually linking them together and cultivating values like mutual aid, right? Community-oriented practices, community values that are devalued in this kind of society. So I think what you're saying is true, that if we really take this radically seriously, linking the individual with the communal in this integral way, then what we're going to be doing is sort of being the antithesis or the supersession of a culture that is driven towards atomization. And to live in the world that way could be quite a radical thing. But how do we do that? How do we achieve that, right, with our practices?
Well, first of all, it's a very integral thing that you just said. In other words, I would think, my suspicion is that people who are at the second tier of this integral level, this just emerges in their practice. They really realize in an essential way, you're a particle and you're a wavicle. And I had a I've been haunted by God. I've had spiritual experiences. I think my first ones were 11 or 12. And, but when I first started using brain entrainment technology, and I, studied transpersonal psychology, experience with meditation, psychedelics, and all this stuff, I started using it in the first 2 or 3 days. I had this huge, class 5 spiritual experience opening. And Diane Hamilton said to me, "You're not enlightened, John. It was just an opening." I said, "Fair enough." I don't feel enlightened all the time, for damn sure, but I had my moments. But anyway, what was really clear in this particular revelation is that, yes, also I was one with everything, no doubt about it. It was there. It's like, oh my God. But there was this little infinitesimal spark of individual John and kind of the intuitive voice, and that really matters. The little self matters. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I started laughing, because you mean the ego matters? Mm-hmm. The ego is one of the most complex things that have ever come out of this crazy, beautiful, intelligent universe that we're a part of. And it was just like, it really helped me in my later work, because I saw that in the West, if we're going to just get into this existential Freudian, psychoanalysis and everything that really gets into the individual ego and dissects it and works with it and does all this stuff, that's really, really good. But if you don't have the transcendent, the big self as a part of it, it's just a dog chasing its tail. It doesn't get you there. And on the other hand, if you go to this, just unitive consciousness and the ego is a lie, it doesn't exist, well, your butt's going to get kicked by the ego. Every time you try to say it isn't real, and you don't have to count for it, and you don't have to take care of it, you don't have to clean it up, it'll get you every time. So this bringing together, and this is one of the, the pioneer moves of transpersonal psychology movement, right? When it came out, Maslow said humanistic psychology isn't quite enough. We need this other thing that brings it together. But there was a reckoning. It was transpersonal, but it, as Ken always says, including the personal. So that really, really has to be included. And I think we just realize that. And I think that gets back, Jeremy, to what you were saying. How do we make this, this individual stuff as a part of a bigger thing, not in a la-di-da, or airy-fairy sort of way, but in a real way. I am working on this for all of us. And I don't have all the answers to these complexities. I'm thinking I'm getting a big idea what it should be. Like, everybody should be loved. Everybody matters. Everybody should be supported from pre-birth to birth, all the way through, whatever that looks like, and put that all together. But it just becomes a part of it. And I think if you have good teachers, reminding us, hey, it's not just about you. I was having a conversation, an interview with a Zen master, and he talked about this Vietnamese Zen master who came over in the early days, and he asked one of the students, "Why are you meditating?" And this is not a Vietnamese accent; I'm just making this up. He said, "Well, to get enlightened." Not good. So I don't know if you asked the same student or another student in the room. Says, "Why do you meditate?" He says, "For all beings." Good. So I think it's important to have elders and teachers and fellow travelers and guides that inspire us, that call us out, that write inspiring books, right? Do inspiring podcasts, that, put it in our music, our art, our lives, because again, I think we started out this conversation with the sense of isolation, and how that ties into addiction and other harmful things that we do. We feel so bloody lonely, and, I've been blessed for whatever, stumbled onto all this stuff and good friends and the right books and the right people at the right times and all this stuff. But man, I almost didn't make it, and when you're, you think you're 19 years old and you just got out of high school, and it's like, Trump's on TV every day, and just everybody's fighting each other and cat fight, dog fights in the American politics, and and it's just like, Jesus, again, it's like, why not get fucked up and feel good at least for a little while, So again, that takes that that lower left support, the we space, that we support each other, you know, and inspire each other and call each other out and keep reminding us, you know, what we learn, you know, what we learn on the mountain, what we learn in these peak experiences, our deep interior voices. How do we bring that back into the valley where we all live and practice it from day to day? I had a student, anyway, he was a client or something years ago, and he was really smart and very successful, had all kinds of money, and you know, and so he ran through all my stuff. Yeah, I got this. And I said, all right, I got that. What else does it have to do? Okay, well, you need to stop being an asshole. All right, so I want you to go out today, and when you go get gas, just be really kind to that person, you know, and just be respectful. And they're like, you know, I mean, and that's a practice too. And can we, you know, reach across the barriers of our differences, you know, and go beyond our tribalism to really, you know, love. And, you know, what I've tried to do, it helped a lot before this pandemic thing hit, but I was asking like Trump supporters, you know, what's up? What do you see in this guy? You know, and in a way that, and I wouldn't try to trump them, if you will, or try to make them wrong or give them some great answer why I thought they were saying was stupid, but just to really listen to, you know, what is it, you know? And if you listen and you ask the right questions and they can tell that you're really interested, you know, you're not, your eyes are blocked and, you know, you're computing all your ideas of why this is ridiculous, but just with an open heart, that can help, you know, that's a tool.
John, are you familiar with the rat park experiment?
I think so. Remind me.
So, you know, they did the study early on where you had the single rat in the cage and you had the water laced with Coke and it just kept hitting it until it died.
Yes,
and
yes, absolutely.
They did another experiment where they didn't isolate the rats and they had them in sort of they called it a rat park. So it was more of a socially friendly environment to the rats. And in this experiment, the rats, not to say they avoided the Coke water, but they didn't die, and they were able to sort of adjust better to that sort of substance in their environment because they were more connected with the sort of the community.
Yeah. And
I guess I see a lot of parallels, especially when I'm working with youth in the community too, of a lot of times I ask them, you know, a lot of them are so self-centered in the sense I'm here just to do me is their sort of common phrase to that. And how to recognize that it's not all about you and that you are in a community and that you are connected with other people. And I just wanted to see if you had a riff on that.
Yeah, well, I think that the rat thing is really good. And I think for people who have a good support group and a community and people they love and families, intact families and all this kind of stuff, functional families, whether they're intact or not, have much better chance of getting well, in my experience, because they have a support group and they have a reason to do it. You know, sometimes when you're getting ready to go through the hard work of recovery, if it's just about you and you really don't give a shit about you and anything else, it's a hard sell. I mean, not that it can't be done, because you have to start caring about yourself and caring about others, but you're really at a deficit place. And there was something else that you said, Matt, followed up from the rat thing. Do you remember what that was?
Just if there's a connection to, I mean, just to the community and the importance when you're doing a recovery plan of how to connect more with other people, if it is just all about you.
Yeah, well, you know, I think what brought up, and I think when you're working with young people or people in general, you can just say, you know, and I totally get that's where you're at right now, you know, but it won't always be that way. You know, someday you're going to get married, have a child, something's going to wake up and you realize, oh, now I know what Matt's talking about. So I'm just going to plant a seed with you, brother. So you just know that. And maybe that's just where you're at. And that's okay. Be where you're at. Enjoy. Try not to hurt yourself or others, but, you know, enjoy it. But you're not at the top of the food chain here. You're going to grow and things are going to shift. And just to be able to talk in those terms and remind people how that goes is, get people thinking in the right directions.
I'm not an expert in like the psychological therapeutic modalities that are out there or social services, but I work with the mediators and facilitators who are contracted by the Department of Human Services to facilitate family decision meetings.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my computer froze. And there are a lot of people who are in the meetings who are struggling with addiction, alcohol, drug problems, domestic violence, all the things you'd imagine, who therefore the government took away their kid, right? So they have to jump through these hoops and go through all these court orders to get their kid back. And one of the things in my opinion, is a problem is that our society and mainstream psychological and support systems that exist, whether it's through nonprofits that people go to or doctors or psychiatrists, is that we don't distinguish between waking up, growing up, and cleaning up.
Yes.
And so when someone needs help growing up or waking up, it's all consolidated into cleaning up because that's all we kind of understand. And that's just kind of an observation that I've had being in the field for the last 10 months. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Well, I think it all follows from what you just said. Yeah, it's very partial and it's very limited, and it's kind of what first tier therapy or social work looks like. And when and I was always pretty good at giving the elevator aqua speech when I first started working with addicts in my home. They sent me they sent me all their videos at the time. I said, great, these guys are gonna, they'll just watch Ken and they'll get it. And they put on Ken and just their eyes crossed, right? And smoke came out of their ear. They go, what? Okay. So let's see. let's see if we can do this. Anyway, and one of my first groups, I was working with Marco Morelli. I don't know if you know him, but he's a great guy, just a precious soul, and really good integralist, and worked with Ken, on a really close basis for years. And so I started having to teach and model myself, and I'm with this guy that had been with Ken. He must think I'm a complete moron. He's been sitting with Ken all these years. And I look at it, is that okay? You got it, John. You're doing good. You're doing good. So I learned that to make it understandable, and it's intuitive. None of this stuff is too complicated when you explain it. Like states, you talk, man, I had no problem teaching states to addicts. Their lives have been about chasing states and they completely get it, and in the book, and I talk about how, integral practice is evolutionary. You consolidate what you've done, you clean up what you haven't done from the past, and you start moving up, hopefully, to these higher levels of your own being. Well, addiction is the exact opposite. It's devolutionary. So you start out here, and pretty soon you're back to these really primitive, asocial morality where nothing matters, anything, not even yourself. It's all about the high, okay? And when you just to inoculate people with these ideas that you have to take care of the interiors, that it is developmental and different people will speak from the levels they're at. And of course, the big thing that we all have to learn is you can't argue somebody out of their level, unless they're already there and they just needed somebody to kind of confirm it. But you can't, just go and beat somebody over the head and show them, why science is really good if they're at pre-scientific level, It happens. The good idea. That we have eros, as Ken talks about. This part of us that really does want to get better. And so, if you provide the practices and the support and the education and all four quadrants, right? We think, and it seems to see that people will aspire to become better human beings, and become more skillful. But man, we have to take care of it. And if not, we have a society of narcissism, right? What a bummer. It is such a drag, For example, our president, the guy's an absolute narcissistic personality in a clinical sense, I would venture to say. I think I'd be supported by, psychologists and psychiatrists and professionals on this, but it's all about him. There's no empathy there. There's no any capacity to self-reflect. Like, oh, I might have fucked up. I might have something wrong, or maybe my life's just been a bunch of bullshit and I've been doing the wrong, you know, that capacity to self-reflect. And if we don't take care of people, I don't know what happened to him in an early age, but these, you know, these characterological disorders, such as a narcissistic personality disorder, man, it's hard. I don't think, you know, when I was in grad school, we were talking about personality disorders. It's not just neurosis, but it's these disorders like being a sociopath or being a pedophile or being a narcissist. And I said, so what you're saying is you're perma-fucked. And the professor said, well, it's not the way I put it, but yeah, that's about it. And I'm like, oh my God, you know? So it again, it brings up, you know, to your comments earlier about society. You really have to pay attention to the kids, you know, and we're here now in Louisiana doing elder care for my wife's aging mother. But, you know, she gets this government help. Why can't her children get it, you know? Why can't, what about teenagers? Don't they get our love and support? How does it feel to be a teenager without any medical care? You know, it's like, well, I'm young, so I shouldn't get sick. Odds are, yeah, you got better odds. But what does that feel like? You know, nobody gives a shit enough to invest any of our precious wealth in you, you know, in your physical health, not to mention your moral and spiritual and emotional health. So, yeah, it's the children, of course. And, yeah, I don't know what, frankly, I don't know what to do with people that have these characterological disorders. You know, you definitely want
Pray
to
for them.
Yeah, pray for them and put them in a place where they can't hurt themselves. And hopefully maybe if they could just wrap their heads around it intellectually, you know, for example, if I were a pedophile, you know, well, I wouldn't be. I mean, maybe I would lust after children, you know, want to have sex with children, but I'd blow my head off before I touched one like that. You know, I just couldn't do it. But at that level of pathology, there's no empathy. You know, you're not thinking of what you're doing to that child. It's just, again, it's narcissism.
Hey, John, I had a question for you, sort of policy directed. Our nation, we have a history from prohibition to the war on drugs of sort of making mood altering substances sort of a taboo subject. Are you familiar at all with the Portugal model?
Say more.
The Portugal model, I guess right now is being touted, I think, from the United Nations. I know Andrew Yang was supportive of it. It sort of has to do with the decriminalization of all hard drugs and having society be more responsive from not taking it as a criminal issue and treating it as a mental health issue. And I was just wondering if you had a take on that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any simple answer to that. You know, generally I feel, you know, okay about pot being legal in more places now. I think that the I don't know what's going to result of it, but it doesn't seem like things are getting worse. And I think we've all learned that plant has a lot of good benefits that are really useful and a lot better than some of the medication that people are being prescribed. What do you do about the harder drugs? Yeah, I mean, well, it's just a matter of, for example, meth. That's a big one. And I've been dealing with stuff along those lines recently. That's some vicious stuff, man. You know, I don't think there's any kind of good recreational anything with that. I mean, yeah, it's recreational. You just want to go, you know, but God, it destroys people so quickly. And do you lock somebody up if they're a meth addict and criminalize it? No. But is it okay? No. Do you go after those who are making the stuff and pushing the stuff? I mean, my God, shouldn't we? You know, there's something good about it. You know, so I think when you try to lump all substances that alter consciousness, you know, like in Denver now, mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms are not illegal. Yeah, I can live with that. I think that's probably a really good thing. I don't think you could take mushrooms and vote for Trump, you know. not a heroic dose. I just don't think. Anyway, yeah, I mean, because in those, at least my experiences with those teachers, it's like, hey, man, narcissism is not the name of the game. You know, that goes away really, really quickly. So I think it would have to be probably taken on a substance by substance basis. And, but we do have a moral obligation to protect our children from poison, you know, and no reason a kid should be doing this stuff. And anybody's getting that to young people or anybody else for that matter needs to be taken out, you know, and put in a place where they can't hurt anybody anymore. And into a better prison. Yeah. I'm all about, if you're going to lock people up, they should be, you know, compassionate places, right? I mean, you know, realize that you're dealing with sociopaths and antisocial types, but anyway, it should be better than it is in this country, and there's other countries that are doing it better. That I think they're up to the right track.
Yeah, and you shared earlier you're reading Hansi, and I was just trying to. What's your take on Hansi?
Well, let's see. I'm through his second book. I'm into his second book, and yeah, after the first 40 pages, I totally got into it. I knew he was trying to deconstruct himself or something like the first 40 pages, trying to be really obnoxious and said, you know, just piss everybody off. And I was okay, I get your point. Stop it. Now, and when he actually started talking about it, I was, amen, brother. You know, I thought it was fantastic and really intelligent. And I'm doing some podcasts with Roger Walsh, and he said, you know, this is probably some of the works that gives us the most food for thought than anything he's read in quite a while. In fact, he turned me on to it. And yeah, it's just like, it started getting hope in the political field, if you will, that we could do better. There's good ideas out there. And there's some countries that are further along than us, right? That are doing a better job. And then, of course, you know, each level of development creates its own problems, right? That has to be transcended and fixed by the next one. But at least it's at a higher level than what we're doing now. I would say Scandinavia, you know, is a good example of countries that are just, you know, right off the top that are doing a better job in so many ways. And yeah, they don't have a lot of the problems that we have. They have new problems, new challenges, but they're not as bad. You know, it's not basic survival stuff that we haven't even figured out, you know, in this big, brilliant, rich, powerful country of ours, you know.
Awesome. And this is just sort of a lightning round. What are your current thoughts on the Democratic Party?
They're better than the Republicans. Yeah, that's about it. And, you know, you could be a stupid moron and be better than our current stupid moron, you know. So this would be the best time in the world to be running for president, I think, because, you know, and this stuff about, you know, Biden's sexually assaulted this woman, and I think that's being kind of deconstructed now, you know, that probably that didn't happen, but it was like 27-1, go with the one instead of 27 reports. You know, all the reports are about Trump and all of his sexual assaults and everything. I'm being rather cynical, and I think the country was in a much better situation under Obama administration, which Biden was a part of. And I think Obama really took his position with gravitas, you know. He realized he had a historic role to play as a first, I don't know, he's half white. I don't know what point you turn white or black in our racist country, you know, but everybody thought he's black. So very intelligent, very articulate, honest about his own struggles, you know, with drugs when he was young, and being this, you know, half and half in our culture. Yeah, I thought he was terrific. And it's like during those times I could just kind of rest and realize that there was an adult, you know, driving the car, and I could get, you know, do my work. And now it's just constant bombarded. And I don't think, you know, and there are some good things to be saying about conservatism, right? What used to be conservative, personal responsibility. There's nothing wrong with that, you know, and it's all society or cultural completely. You have no responsibility, or it's all responsibility and the culture has nothing. No, it's somewhere in the middle, folks. Both are right. But what we have now is not the Republican Party. It's the cult of Trump. It's a cult. Who's been in a cult before? I have. Yeah, I got cult door, baby. I get it. Oh, really? Good. And Integral's not a cult. Ken is such a lousy cult leader. He just doesn't have what it takes. Yeah, so I think it's just a cult. He's the leader, and I don't get it. I don't understand. Besides, he's a real bully, and he'll intimidate you, and they'll take away your money to run for office, and you'll be defeated. So if you just read the bullet points every day and say "Seek Heil" every time you want something, you'll be part of it, you know. But yeah, it's horrible. I mean, such a you know, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. We've come a long way since then. We've come a long way, baby. You know, so yeah, I think the Democrats right now are better, a lot better, remarkably better. It's not, oh, it's all the same thing. Oh no, it's not all the same thing. You know, do I disagree with a lot of stuff? Sure, but it's collegial disagreement. You know, it's okay. Did that answer that question?
Yeah. And my final question, John, if you had a magic wand and could change anything in our political system, government, what would you do?
That's a really great question. Can I do two things?
You got the magic wand. You could do as much as you want.
I'd get rid of the electoral college. It's ridiculous. I understand why they did it. We keep on getting presidents or elected by a minority. What the hell good is that? You know? And I would three things. It's my magic wand. I would take care of the money thing. You know, everybody gets, you know, access at a certain point, and you have to say, you know, not just any schizophrenic who wants to scream on the television camera, but, you know, if you get enough people to sign up for you or something like that. So the money that you're able to receive would be very much controlled. Everybody would have to release all their financial shit. You know, if you have somebody that's in bed with the Russian mafia for 30 years, it's good to know before you vote for him. And I had the other thing. What was it? Oh yeah, that the politicians would get housing and a salary commensurate with the average wage and lifestyle of the people they represent. So they don't get to Washington, all of a sudden your value changes because you're part of the elite and the rich. You get all this money coming in from all these, you know, PACs and this and that and the other. No, they would have to live, and so that politics would be seen as a path of service. And there's some lip service around there, but it's really not. Again, it's just narcissistic awfulness, a spell that's on our country. So yeah, those would be three things: make people reveal their finances, get rid of the electoral college, ridiculous, no longer appropriate, and have our servants, the politicians that are there for service, and take away the big fancy houses, the big fancy salaries, and the healthcare policies that nobody else has. You know, let them live like the rest of us and see what it feels like, so they can actually represent us. You know? Awesome.
There's some great answers. John, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. And do you have any final thoughts or anything to say before we depart?
It's very moving to be in conversation with such brilliant and clear and noble young men. It does my heart good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. It's been an honor.
Oh, thank you.